The air in the lawyer's office was thick with a silence that felt heavier than grief. It was a calculated, sharp-edged silence, the kind that precedes a verdict. My mother dabbed at her dry eyes with a silk handkerchief, a gesture more for show than sorrow, while my father stared at the polished mahogany of the conference table as if it held the answers to the universe. Across from me, my sister Jessica sat with an air of serene entitlement, her posture perfect, her expression a carefully constructed mask of somberness. We were there for the reading of my parents' will. It wasn't a surprise. They had always been planners, orchestrating every detail of their lives and, by extension, ours. What was a surprise, however, was the cold, methodical way they had chosen to divide their world. Mr. Albright, the family lawyer for as long as I could remember, cleared his throat, the sound unnaturally loud in the quiet room. He adjusted his spectacles and began to read from the document that would formally sever the last remaining threads of our family. He started with the small bequests, charitable donations, and thank yous to distant relatives. Then he arrived at the heart of the matter. "To my beloved daughter, Jessica," he read, his voice devoid of emotion, "I bequeath the family mansion, with all its contents and properties." A soft, almost inaudible gasp escaped my mother's lips, a sound of triumph. Jessica's mask didn't slip, but a glint of victory shone in her eyes. The mansion wasn't just a house. It was a symbol of our family's history, a sprawling estate that had been in my mother's family for generations. It was where we had grown up, where every Christmas was celebrated, every milestone marked. But there was more. "Furthermore," Mr. Albright continued, "Jessica shall receive the full portfolio of stocks and bonds, the collection of antique jewels, and the Tesla Model S." My father nodded slowly, a silent confirmation of a plan long set in motion. I felt a familiar hollowness spread through my chest. It wasn't about the money. Not really. It was about the statement being made, a declaration written in ink and assets. Jessica was the heir, the chosen one. I was the afterthought. Finally, Mr. Albright turned a page and looked at me. I braced myself. "To my daughter, Emily," he read, and the words that followed were so stark, so dismissive, they might as well have been a slap in the face. "I bequeath the sum of $5,000 for her immediate needs." $5,000. Next to a mansion, a fortune in stocks, priceless jewels, and a luxury car, it was nothing. It was an insult, a final, parting shot in a lifetime of them. The silence returned, this time filled with my unspoken pain and their smug satisfaction. I didn't cry. I had learned long ago that my tears were a currency my family refused to value. I just nodded, my throat too tight to speak. Just as Mr. Albright was about to close the folder, he paused. "There is one more item," he said, looking over his glasses, first at my parents, then at me. "A separate inheritance, left for Emily, from her grandfather, William." A flicker of confusion crossed my parents' faces. Grandpa William had passed away years ago when I was just a teenager. He was my rock, the one person who had seen me for who I was, not for who my parents wanted me to be. His death had left a void in my life that had never truly been filled. Albright pulled out a separate, much older envelope from his briefcase. The paper was yellowed with age, and the seal was made of wax, bearing my grandfather's signet ring. He broke the seal carefully and unfolded a single sheet of paper, a letter written in my grandfather's familiar, elegant script. He handed it to me. As my fingers touched the paper, a jolt, like a spark of static electricity, ran up my arm. His voice, a memory I cherished, seemed to whisper in my ear as I read the words he had written for me so long ago. "My dearest Emily," it began, "if you are reading this, it means I am long gone, and the time has come for you to receive your true inheritance. It is not something your parents know about, for it was a secret I kept for you, and you alone. It is a place where you can build a life on your own terms, away from shadows that seek to dim your light. I leave you my ranch in Montana, the deed and a key to which are enclosed. It is a hidden place, a wild place, a place for a heart as strong and free as yours. Go and build your own legacy, my wildflower." Beneath the letter was a rusty, old-fashioned key and a folded, official-looking document. The deed. He had left me a ranch, a hidden ranch. While Jessica was inheriting a gilded cage, my grandfather had left me the wilderness. He had left me a chance. The rustle of the old paper in my hand was the only sound I could make. My parents and Jessica stared at me, their faces a mixture of confusion and annoyance. A secret inheritance? From a man they had always quietly resented for his free spirit and his unconditional love for me? It was a wrinkle in their perfectly tailored plan. A ranch? Jessica finally broke the silence, her tone dripping with disdain. In Montana? What on earth would you do with a dusty old ranch, Emily? There's probably no Wi-Fi. She laughed, a short, sharp sound that was meant to cut. My father shook his head, looking at Mr. Albright as if he'd been betrayed. William was always sentimental to a fault, he muttered, dismissing the entire affair. My mother simply looked at me, her eyes cold. Well, don't expect us to come visit, she said, as if the thought of it pained her. Their reaction was the final confirmation I needed. I folded the letter carefully, clutching the deed and the key in my fist. For the first time in that sterile office, a genuine smile touched my lips. You don't have to worry, I said, my voice clear and steady. I won't ask you for anything. I stood up, gave a polite nod to Mr. Albright, and walked out of the room without a backward glance, leaving them to their mansion, their jewels, and their hollow victory. The $5,000 check felt different now. It was no longer an insult. It was a severance package. It was gas money. It was seed money for a new life. I went back to my small rented apartment, a place I had chosen specifically because it was mine and mine alone, and I began to pack. I moved with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. I packed my worn-out jeans, my hiking boots, my collection of books, and a framed photo of me and Grandpa William, taken on a fishing trip when I was 10. I left behind the designer dresses my mother had insisted on buying me, the jewelry that felt like a costume, and the suffocating expectations that had haunted my every step. 2 days later, with my life packed into my reliable old car, I was on the road. The journey was a pilgrimage. I watched in the rearview mirror as the sprawling suburbs of my old life dissolved into the rearview mirror, replaced by the vast, open plains of the heartland. Each mile I drove felt like I was shedding a layer of skin, leaving the old Emily behind. I drove for days, sleeping in cheap motels, eating at roadside diners, and feeling the knot of anxiety in my stomach slowly unravel. The sky seemed to get bigger, the air cleaner. I was driving toward a memory, toward a promise made by the one person who had always believed in me. I arrived in the small town of Prairie Creek, Montana, in the late afternoon. It was a place that looked like it had been pulled from a postcard. A single main street lined with brick buildings, a general store, a saloon, and a backdrop of snow-capped mountains that seemed to touch the sky. Armed with the deed, which described the property by landmarks rather than a modern address, I walked into the town's only diner. An older woman with a kind face and a cloud of white hair looked up from the counter. "Help you, hun?" she asked. I unfolded the old document. "I'm looking for a property," I began, "that belonged to a man named William. The deed calls it the Whispering Pines Ranch." The woman's eyes lit up with recognition. "William's place? Goodness, no one's been up there in years. Not since he passed. He was a good man. Kept to himself mostly, but he had a kind heart." She gave me directions that involved turning off the main highway onto a gravel road, looking for an old stone marker, and following a dirt path that was probably all overgrown by now. My heart hammered in my chest as I followed her instructions. The dirt path was barely visible, more of a suggestion of a road than an actual one. My car bumped and jostled over the uneven ground, branches scraping against the windows. And then I saw it. A rusted gate, held shut by a heavy chain. It was exactly as I had imagined. I stopped the car, my hand trembling as I retrieved the old, rusty key from my pocket. It slid into the padlock with a satisfying click. The lock sprang open. I pushed the heavy gate, its hinges groaning in protest. Beyond it lay a meadow, so thick with wildflowers it looked like a painted canvas. In the distance, nestled against a stand of tall pine trees, was a log cabin. It was small and weathered, with a stone chimney and a wide front porch. A large, dilapidated barn stood a little ways off. The entire place was surrounded by a silence so profound it was almost a sound in itself, broken only by the whisper of the wind through the pines. Whispering Pines Ranch. It was run down, wild, and looked like it would take a lifetime of work. And it was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. It was mine. I drove my car through the meadow, the wildflowers bending gracefully under the tires, and parked near the cabin's front porch. For a long moment, I just sat there, engine off, listening. The wind through the pines was a constant soothing whisper, a sound so pure it seemed to wash over me, cleansing the noise of the city from my soul. This was real. This wasn't a dream. Taking a deep breath, I stepped out of the car. The porch steps creaked under my weight, a welcoming, rustic sound. The front door was made of heavy, dark wood, with a simple iron handle. It was unlocked. My grandfather, it seemed, had either a trusting nature or a supreme confidence that no one would stumble upon this hidden corner of the world. The door swung inward with a low groan, and the air that met me was cool and still, thick with the scent of old wood, dust, and something else. A faint, lingering aroma of pine and pipe tobacco. It was the scent of my grandfather. A lump formed in my throat as I stepped inside. Sunlight filtered through the grimy windows, illuminating a million dancing dust motes. Most of the furniture was draped in white sheets, giving the room the ghostly appearance of a forgotten stage. It was a single, large living space. At one end stood a massive stone fireplace, its mantelpiece thick with dust. At the other, a small functional kitchen area with a cast-iron stove and a hand pump for water by the sink. I moved as if in a trance, my fingers trailing over the sheet-covered lumps. I pulled one off, revealing a sturdy, handcrafted wooden table and 2 matching chairs. Another sheet covered a comfortable-looking armchair and a small bookshelf carved directly into the log wall. The books were still there, leather-bound classics, well-thumbed field guides to birds and plants, and books on carpentry and astronomy. It was a library of self-sufficiency. It was a library of him. On the mantelpiece, something caught my eye. It was a thick, leather-bound journal, lying next to an old pipe. I picked it up, my fingers leaving a clean mark in the layer of dust. I blew gently, and the title, embossed in faded gold, became clear. For My Wildflower, A Guide to Whispering Pines. My breath hitched. He had written this for me. My hands trembled as I opened it. The first page wasn't a diary entry, but a letter, written in his strong, familiar handwriting. Emily, it read, if you're holding this book, it means you've found your way home. I know the world outside this valley can be a cold place, full of people who want you to be a pruned rose in a manicured garden. But I always knew you were a wildflower, meant to grow free. This ranch is not a gift. It is a responsibility. It will demand your sweat, your tears, and your strength. But in return, it will give you something no fortune ever can. A place to put down your own roots. This journal contains what little wisdom I have to offer about this land, about the pump that needs priming after a long winter, about the section of the barn roof that needs mending, about the best place to watch the meteor showers in August. The rest, you will have to learn on your own. Be brave, be patient, and be true to yourself. The mountains are listening. Your legacy starts now. William. Tears I hadn't shed in the lawyer's office now flowed freely, hot and cleansing. They weren't tears of sadness, but of overwhelming, gut-wrenching gratitude. He hadn't just left me land. He had left me a map, a guide, a final hug in the form of words. The sun began to dip below the mountains, painting the sky in fiery strokes of orange and purple. The practicalities of the situation began to set in. I found the main breaker and with a stiff pull, restored power to the cabin. A single bulb flickered to life, casting a warm yellow glow. As Grandpa's journal had warned, the hand pump in the kitchen refused to draw water, but he'd also written where to find the priming jug. Following his instructions felt like a scavenger hunt left by a beloved ghost. After a few minutes of effort, cool, clear water gushed into the sink. I didn't have the energy to tackle the barn or to begin the monumental task of cleaning. For my first night, I simply unrolled my sleeping bag onto the sheet-covered bed in the small, adjoining bedroom. The mattress was firm. The air was cold, but I had never felt so secure. Outside, a universe of stars emerged, more brilliant and numerous than any I had ever seen. I lay there for hours, the journal resting on my chest, listening to the whisper of the pines, feeling the weight of my past life lift, and the boundless possibility of the future settle in its place. I was not the forgotten daughter. I was the keeper of the ranch. I was home. The first morning at Whispering Pines arrived not with the jarring blare of a city alarm clock, but with the gentle, persistent light of dawn creeping over the mountaintops. It spilled into the dusty bedroom, tracing a path across the floor and onto my face. I woke slowly, every muscle aching from the long drive and the tension of the past week. For a moment, I was disoriented, the unfamiliar silence pressing in. Then I remembered. The ranch, the key, the letter. A smile spread across my face, genuine and unforced. My first day was a baptism by dust and determination. I threw open every window and the front door, letting the fresh, pine-scented mountain air wage war against the mustiness of a decade. The task of cleaning the cabin alone was monumental. I swept away thick cobwebs that hung like macabre chandeliers, scrubbed layers of grime from the kitchen surfaces, and beat the dust out of the old armchair until my arms ached. Every bit of progress was a small victory. Uncovering the true color of the wooden floorboards felt like an archaeological discovery. Grandpa William's journal was my constant companion. It was more than a guide. It was a conversation across time. The wood stove draws best when the wind is from the west, one entry read. Another advised, don't bother with the old generator unless you have the patience of a saint and the arm of a blacksmith. Better to rely on the grid power for now. His voice, full of dry humor and practical wisdom, echoed in my head as I worked. After securing the cabin, I turned my attention to the barn. It was a vast, beautiful structure, but time had been less kind to it. As the journal had forewarned, a portion of the roof on the north side had collapsed, leaving a gaping hole to the sky. Inside, rain and snow had rotted floorboards and turned old hay into a damp, mulchy mess. The scale of the disrepair was overwhelming, and for the first time, a sliver of doubt pierced my resolve. My family's mocking words echoed in my ears. What on earth would you do with a dusty old ranch? I stood there, surrounded by decay, feeling small and utterly alone. I could quit. I could sell the land, take the money, and go somewhere. Easier. But then my eyes landed on a workbench in the corner, covered in old tools, all neatly hung on the wall behind it. Saws, hammers, wrenches, all coated in dust, but otherwise solid and well cared for. My grandfather hadn't quit. He had built this place with his own hands. The thought steadied me. This wasn't just a challenge, it was the entire point. With renewed purpose, I started a list. I needed lumber, roofing materials, nails, tools I didn't have, and a mountain of cleaning supplies. My severance package from my parents suddenly seemed like a lifeline. I locked up the cabin and drove back toward Prairie Creek, the list clutched in my hand like a battle plan. The town looked even more charming on the second visit. I pulled up in front of Sorensen's Hardware, a classic store with a large window display of tools and gardening supplies. The bell above the door jingled as I entered. An older man with a thick beard was helping another customer, so I was approached by a younger man, probably in his late 20s, with kind eyes and a friendly, open face. Sawdust clung to his jeans and flannel shirt. "Can I help you find something?" he asked, his smile easy and genuine. "I hope so," I said, handing him my long, ambitious list. He scanned it, his eyebrows raising slightly. "Big project?" "You could say that," I replied with a wry smile. "I'm the new owner of the Whispering Pines Ranch." His eyes widened in surprise, followed by a look of genuine pleasure. "William's place? No kidding. My name's Jake. My grandfather used to fish with him. He said William was the real deal. It's good to see someone up there again." The warmth in his voice was so unexpected it almost took me aback. There was no judgment, no skepticism, just simple, human kindness. He spent the next hour walking me through the store, helping me find everything I needed. He didn't patronize me or question my ability to handle the tools. He just offered practical advice. "For that roof patch, you'll want these galvanized nails. They'll hold up better against the snow. And this pry bar will be your best friend when you're pulling up those rotten boards." As he helped me load the supplies into my car, he hesitated for a moment. "Look, it's none of my business, but a roof that size, it's a tough job for one person. If you need a hand, my cousin's a roofer. I could give you his number." The offer was tempting, but I knew this was something I had to at least start on my own. "Thank you, I really appreciate that," I said sincerely. "I'm going to give it a shot myself first. I'm a little stubborn." He laughed. "I get that. Well, the offer stands. Welcome to Prairie Creek, Emily." He knew my name. I hadn't even told him. Then I remembered. My signature on the credit card slip. He had paid attention. Feeling bolstered, I returned to the ranch as the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the meadow. The cabin, now clean and aired out, felt welcoming. The supplies, stacked on the porch, were a tangible symbol of my commitment. I was tired, sore, and facing a mountain of work. But as I stood on the porch, looking out at the vast, silent beauty of my land, I felt a sense of peace I had never known. I wasn't Jessica's forgotten sister, or my parents' disappointment. I was Emily, the owner of Whispering Pines Ranch, and I was just getting started. The days that followed blurred into a rhythm of determined labor. Every morning I woke with the sun, my body aching in places I didn't know could ache, and got to work. My first major project was the barn roof. Armed with the pry bar Jake had called my best friend, and he was right. I began the arduous process of tearing away the rotten shingles and splintered wood. It was slow, frustrating work. For every rotted board I removed, I found 2 more. The sheer physical exertion was unlike anything I had ever experienced. One afternoon, as I was perched precariously on the roof frame, wrestling with a particularly stubborn beam, the sky began to change. Dark, heavy clouds rolled in over the mountains with surprising speed, and the wind, which was usually a gentle whisper, began to whip through the pines with a low growl. A sudden downpour was imminent, and my patched-up section of the roof was still vulnerable. Panic began to set in. I worked faster, my hands clumsy with haste, but I knew I wouldn't finish in time. Just as the first heavy drops of rain began to fall, I heard the sound of a truck engine rumbling up the overgrown path. It was Jake's old pickup. He pulled up near the barn and jumped out, already grabbing a large, heavy-duty tarp from the truck bed. "Looks like you could use a hand," he yelled over the rising wind. He didn't wait for an answer. With a strength and efficiency that spoke of a lifetime of this kind of work, he helped me pull the massive tarp over the exposed section of the roof, securing it with ropes and heavy stones just as the heavens opened up. Soaked and shivering, we retreated to the safety of the cabin's porch, watching the rain hammer down on the tarp, which held firm. "I was just in the area and saw the storm coming," he said, shaking the rain from his hair. "Thought you might be in a bind." "Thank you, Jake," I said, my voice filled with more gratitude than I could express. "You have no idea. It's what neighbors do," he replied simply. That one sentence struck me with more force than the wind. In my old life, neighbors were people you competed with. Here, they were people you helped. Jake stayed until the storm passed, and we shared a simple meal of canned soup and crackers at my grandfather's handcrafted table. It felt more real and more satisfying than any of the lavish, silent dinners of my past. That day marked a turning point. I learned that self-sufficiency didn't have to mean isolation. I learned to accept help. Jake introduced me to his cousin, who gave me a fair price to help finish the most dangerous parts of the roof repair, and in turn, I paid them from the small nest egg I was carefully managing. Months turned into a year. The ranch, once a place of beautiful decay, was slowly coming back to life under my care. The barn was fully repaired, its interior clean and organized, no longer a tomb of rot, but a space of potential. I had started a small vegetable garden, guided by another chapter in Grandpa William's journal, and the sight of the first green shoots pushing through the soil filled me with a primal sense of accomplishment. I even adopted a rescue dog from the town shelter, a scruffy mutt I named Gus, whose constant, happy presence filled the silence. One evening, out of a flicker of morbid curiosity, I searched my family's name online. The first result was a glossy Society magazine article. It featured a photo of Jessica, draped in jewels, standing beside my mother in the grand ballroom of the mansion. The headline read, "Hosting the season's most exclusive charity gala." They were smiling, but their eyes looked as cold and hard as the diamonds around their necks. I felt nothing. No anger, no envy, just a profound sense of distance. Their world seemed small and colorless compared to the vast, vibrant landscape outside my window. I closed the laptop and went out onto the porch. The sun was setting behind the mountains, the same spectacle of orange and purple that had greeted me on my first night. Gus rested his head on my lap. The whisper of the pines was a familiar comfort. My parents had given Jessica a mansion, a Tesla, and jewels, things. They had given her a life built on display, a legacy of material wealth. My grandfather had given me something infinitely more valuable. He hadn't just given me a hidden ranch. He had given me a chance to discover a hidden part of myself. He gave me a place where my hands could get dirty, where my strength could be tested, and where my heart could finally, truly be free. He had given me a legacy of my own making, rooted in the wild earth beneath my feet. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs a message of hope. Sometimes the greatest inheritances are not the ones that are easily seen, but the ones that lead us back to ourselves.